Welcome to English Speaking Made Easy, and like all our previous episodes, this time too we are going to begin with the Grammar Express. As a continuation to what we were saying in the previous episode, we are still going to do a few more modal auxiliaries. Okay, and modal auxiliaries help to express permission, possibility, give a suggestion, and they are very, very important elements in a sentence in English. In the previous two episodes, we had spoken about can and could, the distinction between that. We also spoke about be able to, may and might. These were the modal auxiliaries that we discussed. And now this time we are going in to consider some other modal auxiliaries, and they are should, ought to and must. Okay. One reason why I feel this is very important is, as a trainer for IELTS, I happen to come across many sentences or many essays which tend to confuse the reader primarily because of the errors that they make with the use of modal auxiliaries. And I will give you one such sentence. I came across this sentence in an essay which read like this: the government will take immediate steps to control pollution. Now, in the context of that essay, it didn't make sense to me. Is the reader actually speaking about something which is going to happen in the future? And then I asked the student, and that is when I realized what the student actually wanted to say is that he wanted to give a suggestion that the government should take steps to combat pollution. So instead of using should there, he used will, which was a future tense word, and that completely changed the meaning, because a sentence, the government will take action against pollution, or the government should take action against pollution, are two sentences which have two different points of meaning, and that is where knowing how to use modal auxiliaries becomes important. Okay. So here I told you, as before, I am going to do three modal auxiliaries. One is must, and the other is ought to, and the third one is should. So let us begin with must. Now, must is a very strong auxiliary. It actually refers to a strong order, duty and obligation. Now, the interesting thing about must is, no matter what the subject is, no matter what the number of the subject is, the must as that auxiliary does not change its form. So, no matter what the tense is, what the number is, or what the person is of the subject, it does not change the form of the word must. So, whether it is you must do this now, she must do this now, they must do this now, irrespective of the subject, the number and the person denoted in the subject, the form of that word does not change. Okay. Now, generally, this is used primarily in the future and the present tense. When you say you must do this, you must file a petition. So, it is definitely used in the present and the future, but there are some instances when must can refer to the past. But when it is used in the past, it is used with the present perfect of the main verb. Like typically in this context, if you can see, she must have gone home, or if you say she must have reached. Now, what does that sentence mean? She must have gone home. Aval veetil poi kanum. She must have reached home. Aval veetil etti kanum. So, in this context, we are using must in the past, but it should only be used with a present perfect tense. Otherwise, must is used primarily in the present and the future tense. Now, what does must actually express? Must tells you obligation, duty and compulsion, and compared to should and ought to, must is the strongest word which actually conveys that what is said needs to be done, that is very important to be done. It is more or less like an order. Now, we are going to look at a few sentences with must and just analyze what exactly the speaker is trying to convey here. Let us look at the first sentence. It is, you must come to class tomorrow. Now, in a sentence like this, I told you it is a very strong word. Here, it is almost like the teacher giving an order to the students that if you do not come to class tomorrow, you will have to face the consequences. So, it is a stronger word there. You must come to class tomorrow. They must recognize our rights. It is a very strong word. He must pay the fine, which means I give you no option. You have to do it. You must pay the fine. Okay. Now, must in that context, must shows that it is an order. You need to do it, there is no way out. Now, must can also be used to talk about necessity. Like sometimes there are certain things that we should do perhaps to improve ourselves, you know. So, we say we must get up early. We have to, we must get up early. I must improve my writing skills. Must we go now? In those kind of contexts also. Now, must also can express probability, or as we say, a logical certainty that something can happen. Like for example, if you want to say, avalu mikkarum poi kanum. Okay, so you say she must have already left. That the word that is used to show up a probability, she, or almost like a certainty. She must have already left. He must be mad to do this. Avanenna vattano to do this. He must be mad to do this. So, in these contexts also we can use the word must, but no matter what it is, it definitely denotes or signifies a very, it's a very strong word, and whenever it is used, it conveys something in a very strong way, much stronger than ought to and should. Now, another way we use it is when you want to show a very, what do you call it, you want to do something, it's a very strong determination on your part to do it. So, you say, I must go now, whatever happens. Which means this is like a very strong determination on your part. So, if you see all these sentences and the contexts in which must was used, remember, compared to ought to and should, this stands out slightly high in terms of it being very strong. The next word is ought to. Okay. Now, ought to is slightly different from other auxiliary verbs, because unlike other auxiliary verbs, ought does not stand alone. It is, you have an addition, it is complemented by a word called, by a complement called to. It's ought to. You don't use the word ought alone, it's always ought to. And if you notice, most other modal auxiliaries don't have a to infinitive after them. Okay. Now, ought to, very similar in terms to must, but not as strong. This also shows duty, necessity, or a moral obligation that the speaker expresses, okay, but it's not as forceful as must, but it is definitely stronger than should. Okay. So, when you say you ought to be punctual, it's your duty, it's an obligation. We ought to help the poor. You ought to visit your friends once in a while. See, in these sentences, it's an obligation, it's a duty that you need to do. And ought generally points to a present or a future time. There are times when ought can also denote a past tense, but this is when it is followed by a perfect infinitive in these kind of sentences. You ought to have helped him. It means it was your duty to help him, but you didn't, you know, you ought to have helped him. So, you see, we've used the word to have, that's how it came in, you ought to have helped him. Now, the third word that we are going to discuss is the word should. Now, should is very, very useful. It's a very simple word. All you need to remember is should also shows duty and obligation. It is a wonderful word which you can use to give suggestion and advice. And among these three, should is not as strong, which means should is like you're telling the other person, you're not imposing your point of view. Now, you're telling him, I think you should come early. It just means it's my opinion, you're not imposing it. You can take it or you need not take it, or you can take it, that's up to you. But it's lighter than ought to and must. And this distinction is very important, because otherwise it can have, you know, when you listen to it, if you really need to know what you have to do, you need to understand how strong these words and how they're used in sentences. Okay? So, it's a lovely word to give suggestion, advice, obligation and duty. So, look at the sentences here. We should help the poor and the needy. Now, this is just an opinion. Because you don't help the poor and the needy, no one's going to come and do anything to you. The speaker only feels it is ideal, it is great. So, we should help the poor and the needy. We should not lie. It's not like he's imposing it upon you, but it's a suggestion. We should not lie. We should all work for the common good. You should pay the fees in time. See, in all these circumstances, it's like someone is giving you an advice. It's good, it's nice. Now, we can also use should in conditional clauses. Okay. Now, here how it helps is when you're using it in a conditional clause, it expresses possibility and suppositions. For example, you use it like this: if she should come, ask her to wait. Should it rain, we will cancel the train. So, these are all possibilities. So, should is also used to express likelihood, you know, I should be able to finish this work in time. എനിക്ക് മിക്കവാറും ഈ വർക്ക് ടൈമിൽ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും. I should be able to finish this work in time. You should be able to beat him. You know, these are all possibilities. Now, like I said before, the biggest distinction between these three words, which is stronger now, I've repeatedly told you this, so by now I hope it's imprinted among these three words. Must is stronger, it is more like an order. Should and ought to, on the other hand, are more like pieces of advice. Now, I'm going to give you a few sentences with these three words so that it kind of settles in better with you. The first sentence goes like this: he must give up smoking. Now, this is likely, you know, this is not just a mere suggestion. Perhaps this person has really messed up his lungs because he's been smoking. So, now this is no longer a suggestion to quit smoking. This is like an order which is expected to be obeyed. Okay, that's when we use the word must. Look at the next one. He should give up smoking. Here, the tone is slightly lighter. I'm just giving you a suggestion. You may or may not obey it. So, that's how. So, from he must quit smoking, he should or ought to give up smoking. The context slightly varies there. If someone tells you he must wait, that means he gives you no option. It's an order. You know, there's no option. You have to wait. On the other hand, if you say, I think he should wait, which means it would be nice if you could wait. It's like a request. It would be great. He should wait. It's like a piece of advice or a request. Please wait. Now, she must tell the truth. That's very important. You should tell the truth. That's an advice. So, that's how these words are used, and that's just the context in which you need to remember them by too. Okay? So, I hope these three words are clear. Now, we are going on to the next section of our program, which is Lexica. Lexica, your guide to good vocabulary. Now, vocabulary, as we all know, is like the backbone of a good sentence. This is what helps you express what you want to say. And one thing that we all need to know how to express is certain feelings, certain things that we experience. So, in one of the previous episodes, I did speak about certain very basic feelings that we express, feelings of frustration, feelings of being annoyed, feelings of being embarrassed. These three words we had discussed before. Now, I'm taking you through to certain other words which are equally important. The first word I have for you is the word indifferent. Now, this word is not very commonly used, firstly because people tend to think this word has some connection to the word different. Actually, indifferent does not have, that word by itself does not have any connection to the word different. It conveys a completely different meaning. It means when someone is not interested in something, he can tend to be indifferent. For example, I'm in a class of students and what I teach is not of interest to them, and they don't listen to me. So, then I would be telling my colleague, oh my God, these children are so indifferent. They're just not listening to me. That is, they are not interested. So, and if you ask someone who does not listen to you, how can you be so indifferent? So, indifferent generally means when you don't have an interest in what's going on. That's when you turn your face away and you become indifferent. It can be very difficult teaching children who are indifferent in class. See, so and that word is good because as we go in life, we are going to see many people who are going to be indifferent to what we say, indifferent to what we suggest. Okay, and so it is important that we know this word, and this is actually perfect word to describe teenagers. They're generally very indifferent to advice. So, the first word was indifferent. The second word is a very negative word. It's a quality I personally feel none of us should be guilty of having. This is called being judgmental. From the word itself, I think you get the meaning of that word. It means someone who's extremely critical. Someone who's, it's a negative word also, someone who just jumps to judgment without any reason, and there are quite a few people around us who are like that. Okay, so when you use the word judgmental, it describes someone who forms opinions. He's very, what do you call, sometimes very harsh and critical opinions about people. And such people who are judgmental are neither open-minded nor easygoing. Very difficult to deal with them because they're just so closed. They're always looking to find fault and to be very critical. And they're not open-minded or easygoing. So I assume that you understand it's not a great quality to have. The second quality is being judgmental. The third one is very interesting. It means, it's a word, you may not have heard of this word before, but it's a word that it's a feeling, it's something that we all generally have. It's called complacent. Okay, complacent. It may be a difficult word, a word that you haven't come across, but the word and what it suggests is very, very important. Complacent generally means someone who feels, who's very satisfied with what they have achieved in a very negative way, which means, when you feel, I'm okay, I think I'm good enough, I've done enough, I know enough, and you sit back and you relax, which is very, very critical because it stops your progress in life, it stops you from exploring new things. So when someone is there who says, oh, I'm good, I think I'm good, he's very complacent. If someone feels, I don't think I need to do anything more, I already know everything, he's being very complacent. It's not a very great positive quality because it stops you from exploring further. So you don't try out new things because you feel, yeah, you're very smug about it. Yes, I think I know. That's the word complacent. Okay, so we've had 3 words which I discussed: indifferent, another word was complacent, and the second word was judgmental. Now look at the sentence we can use with the word complacent. We can't afford to become complacent if we want to make this business a success. We can't afford to become complacent, because if you are going to become complacent, then what can happen is you will stop looking at new avenues, you will stop looking at innovation. Okay, so we cannot become complacent about any of our, you can say, we can't become complacent about any of our products. We can't, and when you use that in a sentence like this, we can't become complacent about any of our products, it basically means we can't be smug and say, oh, people are very happy, we don't need to improve of it. The minute you become complacent, you stop all the doors of further progress and innovation. The last word is elated. Elated is a very simple word. It just means being happy. Being happy in the sense that being very happy when you get the good news that you won a lottery. You don't just become happy, you become elated because you're very happy. Like you have synonyms like you're very overjoyed, delighted, jubilant. These are all words which are synonyms of elated, and it's a nice word. I felt elated after beating Dennis at chess. Dennis could have been a very strong opponent. You beat him at chess, so I felt elated after beating Dennis at chess. So these are the 4 words that you can definitely use in your everyday conversation. It's also good to know them because you might come across them in the books you read, and now you know what it means. So that's good there. Okay, so with this, we're moving on to the next section, and that is, let's say it right. So here we are going to do a little tricky area this time. This is about how we pronounce brand names, and this is quite difficult because most of these world famous brands that we do come across are either from France, and the way they are pronounced is very different from how we think. No, it's very different from what we believe. So it's important to know how to pronounce them because we're living in this globalized world. All these brands are available in our country too. If not the original, at least the imitations go. So you see these words are you might see these brand names very commonly, and so it is nice that you can pronounce them rightly too. So the first word for you, we'll start off with the names of 2 cars. Okay, there's this one name, the name itself is complicated. It's Chevrole. It's like a French name, but it's an American brand, and the name of that and how you pronounce that word is Chevrolet. Chevrolet. Okay, that's how the word is pronounced. In America, they just call it, shorten it, and they call it Chevy, but it's Chevrolet. The name of that car is Chevrolet. Now, the other brand of car, this is a German brand, and here the word P-O-R-C-H-E. This word, the stress goes on to the first syllable. It's Porsche, Porsche. That's because it comes from German. Then now we'll go on to certain other, we'll give you two names for two brands of clothing which are very, very popular in our country too. One is, this is A-D-I-D-A-S. It's pronounced Adidas, Adidas. Okay. The second one is L-A-C-O-S-T-E, Lacoste, Lacoste. It's also a French word. Okay, and this is a very, very popular brand of men's clothing. It's Lacoste. Now, there's this one brand of fast food which is slowly catching up in our country too. It is MC, D-O-N-A-L-D-S. You must have seen it. I think it's there in many prominent cities, and most people tend to pronounce it as McDonald's. That's wrong. It's McDonald's. McDonald's, the M and C. So, saying McDonald's or McDonald's and all that is wrong. It's McDonald's. I am sure you've come across this brand of fast food, very, very popular around the world, and you call it McDonald's, not McDonald's, McDonald's. Okay. Now, another one is this car hire service. Now, they are also into food delivery. It is U-B-E-R. I've heard lots of people pronounce this word as Uber, because you have that U there. It's not Uber, it is Uber. Uber. It's not Uber, it is Uber. The next word is, this may not be something, it's a slightly expressive high-end brand, so it may not be very commonly used by us, but we may have seen this brand in movies, and you might have seen imitations of this brand. This brand deals with clothing, with perfumes, with creams. It's a very, very, very high-end popular brand, and it's C-H-A-N-E-L. Unfortunately, it's not pronounced Chanel, it is Chanel. Chanel. Okay? So, if you read that and say Channel, that's going to be very funny. And the last word, another brand of shoe, N-I-K-E, is pronounced Nike. Nike. Okay? So, I hope you've got an idea about how you pronounce these very, very popular brands. Okay? So, now we are going to wind up this program with one last segment that we have, and this is where we just give you conversations, simple conversations, so that you can have a hang on how conversations are developed in English, and we call it Let's Talk. So, here, as we do in all our conversations, there are two people involved here. So, the first person, and I have just given them as A and B, you can give them any name. Just imagine A, the first person meets his friend, and he asks him, his friend looks really down. So, he asks him, hey, what happened? And the B, the other person says, I'm worried about my son, which means when you can I'm a little worried, tensed. So, his friend asks him, is he unwell? And he says, kinda. He fractured his leg and he can barely walk. When you use the expression, he can barely walk, means he can he's walking, he can barely walk. The worst bit is he has his board exams next week. Okay, see the expression? The worst bit is he has his board exams next week. So then your reaction to something like that is, something bad, you say, oh dear, so how is he coping up? So you saw the expression, oh dear. Again, in Malayalam you would say, Ayu, since the English equivalent, oh dear, how is he coping up? And his friend says, not too well. I'm afraid he can't seem to focus because of the pain. Okay, I'm afraid he can't seem to focus because of the pain. That particular expression, I'm afraid, please don't mistake it to say enikku pediyana. It's just something you say, I think, I'm sorry, I know, I'm afraid he can't seem to focus because of the pain. And then you kind of console your friend and tell him, I hope he gets better. Do convey my regards to him. I'll drop in when I can, perhaps this weekend. And his friend says, bye. And he says, take care. And the other person also reciprocates with bye. So, this is how a simple conversation develops here. Now, with this, we've come to the end of our program. I hope you enjoyed the program, and I'm sure you can use what you've learnt in your everyday situations in English. Okay, so until I see you next time with a fresh episode, I'm signing off. Thank you.